November is here. We're getting close to the end of the year. We're also entering into the colder months. What is this colder month bringing towards the United States for 2022? Let's talk November. I'm 5 News Chief Meteorologist Matt Standridge. Overall, there's going to be a lot of swings. Once we get to November, we're watching the Canadian plains and also even farther towards the north and west into parts of Siberia where the ice pack is starting to grow. As the ice pack grows in the polar regions, colder air masses are able to develop and then dip south, and that gives us a lot of crazier weather as we go into the winter months. The big question is, where does that cold air go and how far south can it reach? Overall, for the month of November in 2022, we probably are going to be expecting more dips in the jet stream back off towards the west. The overall jet stream pattern will probably keep reverting back to what you see here on the map, where it takes a dip towards the Pacific coast. You got that cold air coming in towards Seattle, Portland, parts of Boise, Idaho, then Montana itself, and then wrapping back off towards the north. We may see a higher signal of colder air towards the western half of the continent rather than the eastern half. We're still going to get cold days towards the east, but overall, probably more so back west. What does that mean? Well, the jet stream kind of wraps around some of that colder air, and so this is generally the path of where showers and thunderstorms will develop, low pressure systems will develop, and then swing on through. They'll probably dip south and then move towards the northeast. This is a very general pattern for as we enter in towards the winter months. But overall, a little bit back farther towards the north and west, and sometimes it may otherwise do so. That also keeps the weather chances back towards the north and west too, and the cooler air. So when we're taking a look at the monthly temperature outlook, this is coming in from the CPC. Overall, for the course of November, if that jet stream, more often than not, stays back off towards the west, that keeps the cooler air in some of the Pacific Northwest regions. So from North Dakota, from about Dickinson westbound into Montana, parts of Idaho, Oregon, and then Washington, cooler than normal temperatures expected. There will be dips back towards the east, but a lot of times as that jet stream goes back, expect warmer than normal conditions for much of the central United States, especially from the Corn Belt south into the Ozarks and the southern plains of Texas back south to the Gulf Coast. And overall, if we're not able to dip that jet stream towards New England, we're talking about much warmer than normal conditions, because a lot of times we should be getting a lot cooler in parts of New England and the northern Mid-Atlantic and parts of the Great Lakes. But if we only have a few dips for the month of November, overall, we're probably talking about a much warmer than normal November for the Great Lakes, anywhere from St. Louis and Indianapolis, Cleveland, right to Syracuse, and then the metropolitan areas of New York right into Boston. And it kind of mirrors where we get more rainfall and we get drier weather. So with that jet stream back off towards the north and west, that's where the majority of systems come in. And this is the time of year when we really start to ramp up the rainfall and then eventually more snowfall for the higher elevations. We're talking about wetter than normal conditions. That means both rain and snow back off towards the west. Now, if we can get these chunks to dip south sometimes, we may be able to get some wetter than normal conditions across parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and southwest Missouri, where we've had a pretty intense drought throughout the summer and the fall. So this is some good news in some drought-stricken areas. But it would carry these systems in and then kind of wrap really quickly off towards the north, where we get a little bit of light rain sometimes, but these things move very quickly. Once they hit that jet stream, just going north and east, whoosh, right through. And that doesn't mean we're probably not going to be able to get as much rainfall and, well, snowfall for some from the Mississippi River back east. So eastern Great Lakes, right through the Appalachians and back south towards the Gulf Coast, drier than normal conditions. We're going to get some rain, but it looks like most of the rain will be back off towards the west, where the more active jet stream pattern will be. So you can almost divide the United States west to east. East, drier and warmer overall. Back west, maybe a little bit wetter, especially if you're closer to the Pacific coast. And then cooler than the normal conditions back off towards the north and west too. And the reason why we're getting colder overall is because we've got less daylight. Less daylight, we're able to cool the atmosphere off, we're able to cool the ground also off even more, especially in the polar regions, and we bring that cold air south. But how much daylight are we going to be losing across the United States, at least the lower 48? Well, from November 1st to November 30th, this is how much you'll at least lose. We've got the color category. So there towards the Gulf Coast, at least 30 minutes. It's about 30 minutes for Miami, but then you head north towards Jacksonville and the Panhandle, Tallahassee and Pensacola, New Orleans, even Houston, somewhere between 30 to 40, probably 35 minutes or so. Once you hit the next color band, that's where you'll lose at least 40 minutes. The 40-minute mark is generally towards the bottom part of each color band. So at least 40 minutes lost across Tennessee, much of the Appalachians, westbound in the Ozarks of of Arkansas. We've got eastern Oklahoma right through the panhandles of both Oklahoma and Texas, and then towards Southern California, much of the desert Southwest, about 40 minutes or so at least, and then at least 50 minutes for much of the southern Great Lakes, Indianapolis into Columbus, and then back east into Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, west St. Louis, Denver, all the way just north of San Francisco and just north of Lake Tahoe. Farther north, we're going to at least lose an hour, where you see this darker blue color, for much of the Adirondacks and parts of New England, most of the LP of Michigan, and back west through Minneapolis all the way to Portland, Oregon, and then really close to the Canadian border. I mean, if you're within 200 miles of the Canadian border, you're going to at least lose 70 minutes. So that's from Fargo north, Bismarck north, and that will also include Missoula, Montana, and Seattle, Washington. The farther north you go, the more dramatic your daylight swings will be. We, of course, get more daylight loss as we go towards the north. But if you know, November is the last full month that we lose daylight. We're going to start gaining daylight again by the end of December. So right around Christmas time is when we start to gain daylight. Now, you're not going to notice that first because for the first few days, it's only going to be about a second or two. But eventually, we've got some longer days ahead of us. But through the month of November, not the case. We've got some of our darkest times of the year in November. And then also with the time change going up, that kind of really messes with things. This daylight loss map does not have anything to do with time change. This is just the overall daylight lost in every single day when you tally it up throughout the month. Time change, all that does is not that you're necessarily losing daylight. You're just moving where you have the daylight in the time schedule throughout the day. But with the time change coming up as we fall back towards standard time, those sunsets are going to be a lot sooner. Many sunsets across the United States will be around 4 to 5 o'clock. And then sunrises back towards 6 a.m., 7 a.m., so it's going to be a little bit lighter as kids are headed to school. Now let's get a little bit hyper-focused right into parts of western Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. What do we normally expect throughout the month of November? So we talked about what we're kind of expecting overall, maybe a little bit wetter, but probably slightly warmer overall. We're going to most days have warm weather, and then we'll watch these systems come through that cool us down for a couple days, but we'll have more warm days than cool days because those systems come in are going to be quick likely throughout the month of November for 2022. But generally in the month of November, we go from about mid-60s to low 50s. In northwest Arkansas, we're picking up over 3.5 inches of rain. In the River Valley, we tend to get closer to the 4-inch mark on average. We may see even a little bit more just because it looks like we can get some pieces in the jet stream to move on through. In the River Valley, we go from right next to 70 degrees back down to some mid-50s. So some big temperature changes underway across western Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. Specifically, right in the Boston Mountains, kind of averaging out northwest Arkansas and the River Valley, we're going to be losing about 45 minutes of daylight throughout the month of November with that 45-second loss. And on top of that, sunrises and sunsets kind of look a little bit weird because of the time change coming up. But our sunrises will get earlier throughout the month once we fall back later this coming weekend. 7:39 for November 1st. By the end of the month, even earlier, just after 7 o'clock hour. The big difference because of daylight loss plus the time change is really the sunsets. You're going to notice them being so much earlier, going from 6:20 to just barely after 5 o'clock. Folks in eastern Arkansas are going to have a sunset just before the 5 o'clock hour. It would be in the 4 o'clock hour, 4:58 or so back in eastern Arkansas. But lots of changes coming up for the month of November. And we're just going to keep on getting colder as the days get shorter. And we also, across Arkansas, generally get our first flurries in November. That's the month we're in now. Get ready. Winter is coming.